And that's if anyone's gone through that process, late diagnosed, it's several hours. So it is a lengthy process. And a lot of it does look back at your childhood. So I know a lot of times people say like, oh, so many people are realizing they're autistic now. It's like, well, yeah, but it's things that's been present for your whole life. So it really makes you look back on your childhood, the experiences that you had in terms of, what you were like when you were really young. And apparently I was a hand flapper. I found out later after the whole diagnosis criteria that that my mother had gotten me to try to get me assessed with one of the top experts on Tourette syndrome in our area because she thought that my hand flapping could be a tic. And I did not get that diagnosis, thankfully, because I don't have Tourette's, so didn't apply. But looking back, I'm like, oh, yes, okay. So that, at least that's an early indication and slightly validating as a late diagnosed autistic that there was something then that nobody understood at the time. I don't blame anyone for not understanding, but that was kind of interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I can get into more of my personal experiences or, and anything related to that. But anyway, I guess to answer the end of the question about the podcast, so I changed the focus of the podcast to neurodivergence in the beginning of 2022 because I just wanted to hear people's stories. I'm not an expert in autism or in neurodiversity or in really much of anything mental health wise, but I do love hearing people's stories and learning from people who have actually experienced things themselves. Because everything I realized I had learned about autism came from someone who is, a professor or an expert or a family member or a parent, but never from someone who is autistic themselves. So I wanted those stories out there. And so probably about half my guests are autistic and the other half are neurodivergent in other ways like dyslexic or ADHD or I've talked to people who are plural, who have dissociative identity disorder. I have an episode coming up with someone who has schizophrenia. I'm just interested in all these different stories and experiences. And it's interesting to see a lot of the things, some of the things we have in common and some of the things that make us different as well.
There you go. So I'm going to make one joke, and it is a joke.
Okay.
But, they got diagnosed, after COVID. So I assume you was normal, and then you got the COVID shot, and then now you're autistic.
I'm trying to think of the timing. Do we have shots then?
Yeah, we may have had shots by 2021.
We did by 2021? I don't remember. I have no concept of time anymore after COVID.
That's the vaccine.
The timeline is just a mess. So,
complete sarcasm. Anyone listening, vaccines do not cause autism. I'll just be very clear with that.
So in community, sometimes we joke about that, but I do always worry a little bit that people
100%.
Take it and run away with it. I'm like, no, that's a joke.
It's a joke.
It's a joke.
Or is it?
Yeah, real quick. What age were you at the diagnosis?
I was 44.
44?
Almost 45,
okay.
Yeah.
There you go. I'm going to kick it back to Spence for any questions or pivots.
Yeah. And then what kind of made you want to actually take the test? Was there anything like in your life that you were just like, I think I should do this?
Like it's time. Like there must have been like a point where you're like, there's too many autistic people I relate to. I assume it's something like that.
I mean, it kind of was like that. And at the time I was also like having some personal struggles related. Some of it was related to some things going on, like in my working life and other personal life. So I was definitely feeling like I was struggling, but I didn't really know why exactly. And I don't even know, I couldn't even explain. It's not like the autism diagnosis like explains like, oh, this is, your whole life explained. Like it does a little bit with that, but it's almost like the diagnosis is just the beginning. It's like, okay, so I have this information about myself. Like, so what do I do with it? Because as probably a lot of late diagnosed autistic adults know, there's not a whole lot of support, at least not in the United States, for someone who gets that late diagnosis as an adult. Most of the supports are for children. So a lot of it you have to kind of honestly find and discover yourself. So whether that's going into therapy or just taking care of your sensory needs. And sometimes it's just really trying to listen to yourself and this sounds so basic, but literally some of us are masking so hard. And by masking, I mean like autistic masking, not like literal masking. I always have to say that in these days. But so that we don't even realize, like, because people have been told us like, oh, it's not that bad. Like you're fine. Like, but so it's that constant draw of like, things are hard for you, but no one really believes it. So because it's fine for everybody else, that you have to sort of undo all that and be like, you know what? If I'm going to a loud place, I don't have to just sit there and get irritated and get like upset because I'm getting overloaded with the noise. I can like buy earplugs. I can step outside. I don't have to go to that place anymore. Like these are things it's like, oh, right, I can do this. I'm an adult. Like,
Yeah.
But sometimes when you grow up a little different and people kind of don't always recognize your reality, this is like a learning process. So that kind of kicked off after the diagnosis and still continues.
There you go. Spence, I mean, that was a great question because there's so many different things about being late diagnosed and it's difficult. Also, Carolyn, like, there's not a lot of services. And to find a therapist, I've had other therapists, Spence, hit me up, but you've seen the DMs. Like, where the hell's a therapist in my community that understands neurodivergence or autism? And I'm like, oh, shit, let me look. And then I'll reach out to my networks and I'll find some. It's really tough because you're going to get a lot of neurodivergent folks that'll end up with neurotypical therapists. And there'll be some wrong diagnosing or some not supporting. There'll be some ways in which medication or diet, exercise, right, that's not technically the best for that individual.
Yeah.
And then the person still continues to mask because they don't want to say that the doctor's wrong because they believe the doctor. And so they can't advocate for themselves. And so they end up getting put in a bad position to not get the actual real affirming care that they need. And then you'll get clients that finally like get a therapist like me and they're like, holy shit, this is awesome. And I'm like, it is? I mean, it was good.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just get excited.
Naz, I mean, yeah. And Naz, you can even tell me as a therapist, I feel like the majority of therapists don't really get any kind of education about what autism or ADHD is, or maybe it's like an elective or they get a couple hours. So then they're talking with someone and their client doesn't match their idea of what an autistic person should be. So they're like, I don't know, this isn't right.
You get like, I'm gonna be real with you. You might get like a couple paragraphs in a chapter about autism. Yeah. At least in the social work field, it's not much. So it's in one class, you'll have a couple pages of neurodevelopmental stuff. And that's about it. So you get no training. You barely get any clients or interactions or none of the case studies are built on like any developmental stuff, any like reading, dyslexia. None of it's on that. It's just anxiety, depression. Maybe you'll throw in some bipolar, but you don't get much training on those things. And so then you get thrown into the field like I did. And I was like, what the? I looked at my boss at St. Mary's. I said, oh, my kids are autistic. And so I started an autism group. And the next thing you know, 10 years later, now I'm a specialist. Mm-hmm. And then throughout that journey, I'm like, I think I'm autistic too. My first boss was like, nah, no, you're not. You just have too many autistic clients. And so you're just starting to feel like them through their stories. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm autistic. And then I met Spencer and we started this pod. I'm like, bro, you're autistic as shit too. And then I was like, all my friends are, family members are, right? It just all starts to make sense when you get older and you get away from that ableist type of thing.
I know you bring out me and I'm like, your longtime friend, Colin. It's like,
yeah, well, I knew he was always, special. I didn't realize he was autistic.
He was something. I didn't know what it was. He was something.
My friend is very mute, just does not talk much at all. And fantastic in a lot of ways. Yeah. Here's a funny autism story, and then we're going to pivot back to Spence for questions. Dad was like, yeah, man, my stomach been hurting. I said, why is your stomach hurting? He said, I ate those 2 bags of Smarties. I said, what do you mean? They came in like 5-pound bags. He's like, yeah, I ate those in like a couple days. It's like, oh, Lord. Fuck. I'm like, but you don't have autism, huh?
I can't wait for him to hear this and be like, that's not true.
That's not true.
I didn't eat both of them.
He's like, the bad ones are horrible, but the good ones make me eat the bad ones. And I was like, shut the fuck up.
that even mean?
Oh, it was fantastic. Love Pops. Let's pin it back into Spencer's questions.
Sure. All right. So, we'd love to know, do you have any activities, whether it's watching certain shows or, knitting something, I don't know, that helps calm yourself during like certain emotions that you're going through?
Oh gosh.
Regulate.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of shows, I'm a big fan of like game shows.
Okay.
So two of my favorite shows are the current iterations of Let's Make a Deal, hosted by Wayne Brady, and The Price is Right,
nice.
which are
Nice.
back to back in my time zone.
Drew Carey.
So Drew Carey, Wayne Brady. So I don't know.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. Check out the full episode on our channel and anywhere you find podcasts. Also, remember to like and subscribe. Whoop whoop!